Morning, everybody. It's a little confusing right now because there are two or three of me, but it's actually not me. It's me, Angela, and people are arriving. So I wanted to welcome my guests today. They are documentary filmmaker Mark Gordon and film producer Jhane Myers. So thank you both so much for coming. I like to not particularly take time to go over your bios, but we'll find out some things about you as we go along. I've posted. So I wanted to welcome my guest.
You're in a feedback loop. You have to turn off one of your leads. The still picture.
Okay, so but we'll unearth some fabulous things about you as we go along, and as we ask some questions, and then at the end we'll open it up for some questions from everybody who's listening. So can you first of all tell us exactly where you are in the world?
We are in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
And do you both live there? Where do you live, Jhane?
Yes, I live here in Santa Fe as well.
And I've heard a lot about Santa Fe from Mark. Is there a film scene there? People love to use that phrase, film scene. Is there a film scene there?
Absolutely. In New Mexico, film is really booming. Well, as much as it can because of COVID, but everything's starting to kind of start up and get back into pre-production.
And
so yes, very
what
much.
What are the just recently somebody made a comment to me about why I wasn't in LA, and I'm like, because there's film everywhere, you know. So if we were in Santa Fe or if we were in New Mexico, what kind of filmmakers would we come across? Who would we meet? What kind of films are people making?
Everything and anything. There's lots of short films being made here. There's features. We have Amazon Studios. We have Netflix. So just because of our vast landscape and the different changes in types of landscape, you know, and if you want to get a good snapshot of the Southwest, this is where you should be. But huge things. I'm working on something later today for the Disney Channel, and Smithsonian shooting something next week. So there's always tons of things.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. Okay.
Yeah, so there's everything from a small local community of independent filmmakers. There's a lot of production that's going on. Things got a little crazy there with the lockdown, but people are coming up with protocols. There's a lot of feature films that are being shot here now, and we have a state film commission that's really helpful for people that come from out of the state. And then of course there's also incentives for shooting here. Every dollar that you spend in New Mexico that's taxable, you get 25% back for a one-up and 30% if it's a series. So they give you a rebate so you can pay your producers and your investors back some money before the film is broadcast or distributed.
Very nice. We might come back to that because I know you've had a lot of experience with that. So the first question I always like to ask, I'm going to start with Jhane. When was it that you first knew that you were a filmmaker?
Oh, Lord.
Sometimes people answer like, oh, well, I was in elementary school.
I wish. Well, maybe so, because I'm a Sundance alumni, two-time Sundance Time Warner alumni. So I did a blog for them, and I remember as being a small child and being raised by my grandparents, we would go to the movies at least once a month. And so I remember my grandfather used to always be excited. We'd try to see films that had natives in them. And always it was non-natives playing natives.
Right.
Or, you know, it wasn't really authentic. And he would always, after we would leave, he would always make a commentary. Oh, well, they did this right. Or, oh, they didn't. So for me, it's always been my mission to make sure that Native people are portrayed accurately. So I think maybe then is when I knew I wanted us on screen and you know, as we are, and not just something fictitious.
That's really amazing. Well, I don't usually share this story, but as a very young child, I used to dream a lot that I was in cowboy movies, but I was always on the horse as an Indian, and I was always winning.
Yay!
And then at the end of the dream, it said the end.
That's amazing. That's great.
Amazing. But yeah, I don't always share that, but those were my dreams. They would say in big letters, the end.
That's great.
I love it.
And Mark, what about you? When did you first know?
Well, I grew up in Southern California in the Valley in Los Angeles, and our neighbors were like Jay
Mark,
Silverheels.
I didn't know that. I didn't know this. Mark and
No.
I have been working together for over a year, and I didn't know this. Okay, yes, go ahead.
So in the neighborhood we lived in Encino, Sonny and Cher were our neighbors, Dick Van Dyke, Jay Silverheels, who played Tonto in The Lone Ranger. Clark Gable lived a couple of miles from us. And so I was in 3rd grade, and my best friend's parents bought him a whole bunch of film equipment. So we started making films in 3rd grade. And by the time we graduated from high school, we had a couple of shorts that had won some awards. And we had done a 90-minute suspense film in black and white, 16 millimeter. And my uncle was a film producer. He had produced the Charlie Chan movies and the Cisco Kid TV movies and TV series and Gunsmoke. And so, you know, it was just, I was gonna, if you asked me when I was in 6th grade what I was gonna do when I grew up, I would say, I'm gonna direct films.
Wow. I can't believe I didn't know that story.
I can't believe I didn't tell you.
Great. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's why I always like to ask this question about when it started, when you got the bug, because it just generates the most fun stories, you know.
So, but by the time we got into college, we had our own little small film company. I studied in film school. I went to LA City College and California Institute of the Arts. And then after that, I made short experimental films and got in and out of it and back.
And so Jhane, when did you actually first get to have that experience that you wanted to have of making sure that Natives got to be in films?
Well, I worked on the PR side in the beginning, you know, as a publicist. So I think probably when that started, but then because I worked on films that had, you know, Natives authentically placed, like Apocalypto. But part of my my mission as a publicist back then was to make sure that we took the film itself to underserved communities, because a lot of people in underserved communities don't get to go to the movies or see some, or they've never been to a premiere. So we'd always make sure we do something like that. So that was kind of important to me. But gosh, I don't know. I think with everything I've done, because if you look at my film resume, whether it's language, whether it's you know, making sure the period is correct, and historical accuracy, you know, that's something that I always put into films.
Okay, so did you say you worked on Apocalypto when you were still a publicist?
Yes.
So that's really interesting to me. So how did Apocalypto go across when you showed that to Native audiences? How did they?
It was pretty amazing. That was kind of my entryway to working with Disney. So like I've always worked as a publicist. Even now I'll take like a job if they need something, like on I was on Lone Ranger, you know, as a publicist.
Mhm.
So I think that I was early on in pioneering Native community engagement, which is a huge thing now. And most of the time, if you have Native filmmakers, or if you have people that, I hate to say I was a pioneer.
She was a
You're a
pioneer.
I don't want to be.
pioneer.
I don't want to be a pioneer, but you know,
Yeah, I think you were a pioneer.
I think that a Native pioneer. So I think that it's really important that you do that, because I think people's perceptions. I mean, everybody wants to see themselves portrayed accurately, and when it comes to Natives, we're like at the bottom of the list. You know, you have African American, you have Hispanic, everybody, the Latinos, everybody has all of their cultures and their parts represented. And I remember one time I was on a panel, and this woman that produces Native films, I mean, not Native films, Latino films, said, oh, you know, but we're always the drug dealers or the maids or whatever. And I said, we're not even in there. So it'd be, we'll take the maid, you know, jobs, and we'll take because you rarely see, you know, Natives in, you know, modern day.
Yeah, that's very interesting about wanting to see yourself on film. I remember the first time I saw my people on film, and actually that filmmaker, Sergio Hiral, is going to be my guest in 2 weeks.
Oh,
But it had such an impact on me that I couldn't speak, which was really problematic because I was leading the Q&A after the film. But I was so stunned at having seen myself on film for the first time. It's that powerful.
oh yes, very.
Yeah. So, but Apocalypto is a very particular film, right? And I think one of the things that I see in underserved communities is that they will tend to get the biggest Hollywood films, and very unlikely to get anything that's more independent, more art film. So I'm just curious about that, about how that particular film was received.
It was very well received, very well. You know, we did an extensive tour with probably like maybe 25 showings in Native American as well as Latino communities. So it was, I mean, just to see that, and to see that in the beginning, and then also to have the filmmaker there to, you know, see that.
Yeah.
Now because of the time of Apocalypto and where we are now, people want to see Native filmmakers talking about their Native made film about Native people. So, you know, we've actually progressed since then. But, you know, even back then, that was kind of groundbreaking that we actually, you know, did that.
Yes.
That kind of outreach.
So, Mark, you're not a Native American.
I believe that's correct.
If anybody hadn't noticed. So
No.
how did you find yourself in a world in which you're making a film about a Native American artist? How did that happen? I love this story.
Well, let's see. It's kind of a long story, but about 10 years ago, I found this book called Edge of Taos Desert, written by Mabel Dodge Lujan. And it's all about how she came from Greenwich Village to Taos, New Mexico in 1917. And it was such an interesting story. I just fell in love with it. And she falls in love with and marries a Tiwa Indian from Taos Pueblo. And she was a wealthy writer and a salon hostess, a social activist. And during the production of the film, we were looking around to interview people who knew Tony Lujan, her native husband, or Mabel, and we were introduced to her great-grandson, his great-grandson, Blue Spruce Standing Deer, who's an artist and a medicine man and a medicine carrier and a singer and drummer. And so I just fell in love with he and his wife and their stories and their perspectives. And he's an amazing artist. And I just thought, well, we did some interviews with him for my first feature film, Awakening in Taos. And we weren't able to use all of them because they were really about his growing up on the Pueblo and his personal story. And I just decided that this would make a perfect second feature film. And then we wanted it to be authentic. We wanted there to be Native Americans on both sides of the camera. So we did a national search to find a Native American, American Indian producer. And here's Jane. She happens to live, what, 5 or 6 blocks away from me?
No.
Live about a mile
A
away.
mile
Oh my
away.
goodness. Oh my goodness. So Mark, I just want to go back a little bit. So
Yeah.
the documentary you made is called Awakening in Taos.
Mhm.
And so the story about Mabel Dodge Lujan, who was this wealthy person from New York, basically had some sort of call, vision, something that brought her to New Mexico, which
Right.
in her time was pretty odd. I mean, why would a wealthy New Yorker go to New Mexico back in the 19th century, I wonder?
Well,
Something pulled her there, right?
well, at the time she was married to an artist, and she had sent him. He wanted to paint the Indians in New Mexico,
Oh.
in Santa Fe, but at the time, nobody had ever even heard of Santa Fe.
Mm.
So, excuse me. So she got on a. He was out here. It was their honeymoon, and he said, "Let's go to Santa Fe, and I'll paint the Indians." She said, "You go ahead on the honeymoon. I'll stay here." And so he wrote all these letters to her, just begging her to come and saying that there was something about her and the Indians that maybe she could show the American people that there were other cultures and other civilizations besides our own. And so she was trying to decide what to do, and she had a dream where she saw her husband's face, and it was replaced by this Indian's face with wide apart eyes. It was like a medicine for her. And she wrote back to him, "Okay, I'm going to come and visit." So she got on a train by herself and made the trip from New York to Lamy, New Mexico, and here she was. But she had this feeling that there was something in Taos. It was just a hunch that she was supposed to come to Taos. And so in those days, it's an hour and a half drive, but in those days it was a 17-hour drive.
Wow.
And so she made the trip to Taos, and the next morning she amazed her husband by renting a flat in Taos, and then she ended up spending the rest of her life there. She later met the man that she had had the dream about.
Just before then, the year she came was which year?
1917.
Oh, 1917. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you use the term Indians because that's the term that they used back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want to go back to Jane. So in 1917, what was happening historically with somebody like Mabel Dodge Lujan, some wealthy white person coming to New Mexico to meet the Indians? What would that landscape have looked like? I don't know if I'm asking the question very well.
Yeah, yes. Well, it would have been like kind of unheard of, because in 1917 was a lot of things were changing for Native people. Native people sometimes were some reservations, the Dawes Act, all of that historical thing was going on, especially for Taos. Taos would have been really closed for non-Native people and even Hispanic people, because that's one reason why the Taos Pueblo has been able to survive for so long, is because it does keep their community pretty closed.
Okay, so the husband was doing the research for his own reasons. She comes along, and somewhere down the road she marries Tony Lujan, who's a Native American.
Yes.
How unusual would that have been? in those days.
Unheard of. And you know, the thing about it that's really interesting was I think that Tony, you know, she came from this kind of liberal intelligentsia of Greenwich Village. And Tony had a harder time having their relationship accepted by the tribe than she did. But you know, it was very unusual to see a couple like this in 1919. I think they got married in 1924. But she also got very involved with Native American rights, and she helped fund a campaign. There was a legislation they were going to try and sell native lands or give them to squatters, and that there would have been about 600,000 acres of sacred tribal land in New Mexico that would have been put in the hands of others. And she launched a national campaign and helped him send a delegation to Washington, D.C. to fight this bill. And it also started a communications between the U.S. government and Taos Pueblo that eventually resulted in about 46,000 acres of sacred land being returned to Taos Pueblo by Richard Nixon, of all people, and the U.S. government. It was the first time land had ever been returned. And she had suggested to the tribe that rather than make it a real estate issue about the land, that the land was sacred and was used for their religious purposes. And so she made it a First Amendment's right that by the U.S. government taking this land away, they were preventing the tribes from practicing their religion. And so that, and of course, Richard Nixon, one of his role models, one of his mentors was a Native American football coach. And he always felt that if he hadn't been discriminated against because he was a Native, that he could have gone on to do even greater things. And there you have it.
So many interesting stories. And Jhane, I believe in your filmography that there's films around this time. Am I misremembering that?
No, that's correct. I produced on Ladonna Harris, Indian 101, and Ladonna Harris was married to Fred Harris, who was a senator. Ladonna's Comanche, and she's my relative. So that was kind of interesting because we had all women and all Comanche women that directed and produced this film. So that was kind of, and then it was kind of odd, like the juxtaposed, I guess, or like sometimes it's just meant to be. I got pulled on to, I was working with Johnny Depp with The Lone Ranger, and Johnny Depp was adopted by Ladonna Harris, and he's the adopted son. So we were on his plane as we were doing Native community engagement, and they had told me, if you can, hit Johnny up and see if he can help us, because actually, you know, an independent film, it's expensive, especially when you're in post-production. And so we needed finishing funds. And so I'm on his plane, we're flying back to LA, and he's sitting on the floor playing his guitar, you know, and he said, so how's my mom's, and this is really how he talks, how's my mom's film coming along? And I said, well, we're kind of stopped because we need to raise some finishing funds. And he said, well, how much? And I said, 50. And he looked at me and he keeps playing, and then he looks up and he's like, 50 what? And then I didn't realize, like, okay, I'm talking independent film world, and here he is in major mega film world, and you know, I could have been saying 50 million, you know, in his mind, because that's like nothing, you know. He goes, 50 what? And I said 50,000. And he looked up at me and he goes, is that all? And I was kind of like, all right, now I feel really bad, because we work on small budgets. And so within a week, we had a check sent from him for 50,000 to finish it.
Great
and
story.
Then I asked him if I could put him as EP so we could continue to try to raise money by using his name. So our film was the first film that he actually executive produced. Well, he didn't actually, but his
Yes.
name
He
was
was
on
the
there.
executive producer.
He came up with the finishing funds. So
Yes, he
Yeah.
did, which was amazing, you know, because most of the time you're piecemealing and it could take a long time to put
yeah,
50,000
yeah.
together.
It's not bad publicity at all.
No, it wasn't. And the cool thing is when our film opens up and it says, you know, a film by, and then it says Johnny Depp. Every single time when we've had a screening and the film opens up, you just hear the audience go, oh, you know, they're, you know, because it's amazing to have a native film and to have somebody that's, you know, your champion that's recognizable to people all over the world.
Yes, yes. And so when I love you using the word community engagement because it's so important for all filmmakers, even if they're not documentary filmmakers, to think about that. So what did you do with the community engagement piece on that film?
On that film, that was great because, well, we didn't get a distribution deal through all of PBS, but so we had to kind of piecemeal it together through PBS. But when we had our actual first screening of it, we did it for the Comanche Nation in conjunction with the Comanche Nation in Oklahoma. So we showed the film at the big history museum in Oklahoma City, and it was, you know, a red carpet event and everything, which was great for Oklahoma too, because they often don't get premieres, even though I did give them a premiere for Apocalypto. So you know, it's something good for that Oklahoma film. I'm originally from Oklahoma, in case you can't tell with my accent. But so that's really good because I think it's inspiring not only to native filmmakers, but to filmmakers, you know, in that state. Like when you do community engagement, you know, maybe it just inspires somebody to tell their story, to tell the story of their people, to tell, you know, to just put their stories on film.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I could listen to you both tell stories all day. So you've had, Jhane, the experience of working in a Hollywood kind of context, you know, big budget studio context, independent context, the context of working with all native filmmakers. And now on the film that you're working with, Mark, and this is kind of what I wanted to talk about, even though it's difficult to talk about, but is working as a native with a white American, and how to navigate that. We were really surprised when we set out on this literally nationwide search. For a producer, with some of the responses that we had from Native American producers, because they assumed we were calling for what I would consider to use them. They just assumed that. And I was shocked because it wasn't so much that they were saying, oh, they weren't mad. They weren't saying, oh, you're calling to use me. They were sort of saying, oh, well, you know, yeah, okay, well, let's talk, you know, and I was like, what? You know, so I just wanted to bring that up. And as I said, I know it's a difficult topic, but.
Not so difficult, but maybe new, because, you know, there's so many, now with native filmmakers in independent projects like this one, and as well as big projects. You know, we're still kind of trying to navigate that, because there are like certain incentives and different things that you can apply to if you have native people as your crew. So I think it just depends on how, you know, like for you, how you look at that and how you want to do that. I'm a hands-on person. Mm-hmm. And for me, I believe that in order for us to change something or make sure that we have cultural accuracy, you have to be there. Mm-hmm. You have to be there, whether it, and in my career, I have taken jobs that I'm not the producer, I'm an associate producer, or I won't do a consultant anymore, but, you know, I have taken jobs just to make sure that I'm there, because if he had a question about natives, he's going to have to call Standing Deer, because he doesn't have a native person in the room. Would it be okay to say this? Would it not be okay? I mean, a prime example is when you were recording the Indiegogo campaign. I was here when he did that. So I actually helped edit the verbiage, because the way that he said a couple of things, I was like, that doesn't sound right if you say that, and it might be like borderline offensive. But, you know, he was open to change. And so he changed some of that verbiage that you'll see in the campaign. And you know, just the fact that he's open to that, you know, he doesn't know like if it's, you know, is it wrong that we do this, or, you know, who are you offending? So, you know, I mean, I think that that's my take on it. It's
Right.
just being there.
Yeah, Jane just really kind of took charge. I sent her a version of the video, and she said, "Oh, this is really good. Are you thinking of reshooting it?"
I said, I'm coming over. I'll be there.
Yeah. So the next morning she was here, and you know, she was having me put blankets over the window, and we spent a half hour trying to get a reflection out of this thing behind me, this picture, and then we went line through line and rewrote, re-edited, and she really took directorial control and said, no, try saying it like this, and maybe have a little bit of a smile here, and you know, and you know, it was great. It was great. When we submitted a film proposal to the Vision Makers, which funds Native American films for PBS, and at the time I was having talks with Jane, and I said, you know, we're bringing a Native American producer on board. She's a Comanche Blackfeet. And they said, well, we're glad that you're doing that, but we don't want window dressing. We want a Native American that's going to be involved in the major decisions of the project, and that's going to be, you know, hands-on with it. And I said, well, that's what we're about.
That's what we're looking for.
Yeah, I have this relationship with the main character of the film, but
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on you know, Native Americans, and you know, she's enlightened me about a lot of things. I'm really excited and grateful to have her on board, and her viewpoint, and I'm just learning something every time I interact with her. So it's a good thing, and I collaborate well with women, so it's good.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
I
I think it's good. I think it's good that he's open to direction, you know, and open to kind of tweaking things. And yeah, when I saw the first one, I was like, no, but I didn't want to like disappoint him, because I want him to keep that momentum up, and you know, he's excited about doing this, but we just have to reframe that excitement, you know. And
She managed it really well.
and then like the second one is just, it's like night and day. And then when you see that, it's like, oh my God, that looks amazing. You should be very proud of this, because this is amazing.
Yeah, and the crowdfunding that you just are launching right now
Today.
Today, yay!
Yeah.
Is
It went live at 9:30.
so you already, because which time? So you already launched it?
Yeah, I launched it.
Yes. Okay,
Hope that's
great.
okay.
Yes. But
And I posted the URL if any of the viewers want to visit the Indiegogo site, and please feel free to donate.
that's right. Jane earlier used the word piecemeal. So often, you know, we don't get to hang with Johnny Depp. So it's, with documentary filmmaking, it's often a question of putting together a bit of money, putting together another bit of money, putting together another bit of money. So Mark, how long is it that you've been working now with Standing Deer on this film, would you say?
We've been working on it for about 2 years, and I self-funded the first year. We had another producer that was working on it that kind of loaned us the money for the first week of shooting, and then over the last 2 years, I've just been accumulating assets, still photographs, wedding videos, you know, everything, and we've done about a dozen interviews, plus there are 2 major interviews that were done for the first documentary that didn't make it into the film, that are just really powerful about his relationship with his grandparents, and his relationship with his father, and what it was like growing up on the Pueblo, and what it was like being part of Mabel Dodge Lujan and Tony Lujan's home and family, because they had visitors from all over the world. So he had a very different viewpoint from his contemporaries about the world. He had a really enlarged world picture, and grew up speaking English as a second language.
Mm. In fact, for people who haven't seen Awakening in Taos or who know this story, the way that we would know about this, people generally in the world would know that Mabel Dodge Lujan started the artist colony where Georgia O'Keeffe did most of her work. Who else were some of the artists?
So D.H. Lawrence, Ansel Adams came and stayed with Mabel and Tony, and at the time, it was like 1929, he was trying to decide if he was going to be a pianist or a photographer. And he did his first book, which was called Taos Pueblo. And after that, he was on his way. There were a lot of, writers, as I said. D.H. Lawrence came out. She gave him a ranch that's now kind of a monument. And of course, Georgia O'Keeffe came, and Mabel, the summer that Mabel came, rather that Georgia came, Mabel had to go to Buffalo to have a hysterectomy, leaving Georgia O'Keeffe alone at the ranch with her husband. And it'll make a good story and a good scene in the film.
One day. What do you think the so there's this very famous gathering place of all these artists from all over the world that suddenly come to this place that you had said Taos was very closed. It was a native community that was very, very closed. From a native perspective, what was that like? How does that look from a native perspective? What happened there with the advent of the colony?
Yeah, I think that what happens is, what I know from being in native communities is that if like somebody brand new came, they wouldn't just welcome them. But if someone starts to live there and be part of the community and have a little interactions here and there, and then later bigger interactions, I think that's what's mainly very important. I mean, at the time, during that time, well, a little bit later is when native art was considered fine art. But at that time, it was still considered craft. And now we have native fine art, which came a little bit later. I think that was with Oscar Jacobson and the Kiowa Five, when it was defined as fine art. So I'm sure there was kind of a little melding of, of artistic, because I mean, think about traditional arts. That's been like the first art of the Americas, forever.
Mabel was very close with Alfred Stieglitz, who was married to Georgia O'Keeffe. And Tony Lujan's niece was an artist named Pop Chalet, who is very well known now. And she brought Pop Chalet to New York and introduced her to Stieglitz, and Stieglitz offered her some shows, and that was New York began to show Native American art as a serious art form. And so she was very involved with that, very supportive.
What year roughly was that? Sorry,
I just asked him that. See? What year was that?
That would be around 1929, 1930, 32.
Okay. And so up to today, Blue Spruce Standing Deer is an artist in many forms, right? So he's a painter, and he's a musician, and he's a medicine man. So which is sort of its whole other art form in a way.
Well, he's technically called the medicine carrier because he was supposed to go through the Kiva training that his father had gone through to become a medicine man. And he had learned a lot from his father, but he was kind of sidelined as part of the Bureau of Indian Affairs had an urban relocation program. So rather than become a medicine man in his tradition, he was displaced to Silicon Valley, California, where he was given training to be a welder. And he was in California for 18 years before the spirit of his tribe called him to return home.
Mm. And was that experience that he experienced, Jhane, of being taken away and put somewhere else, was that something that a lot of people experienced at that time? And how long
Yes.
did that go on for?
Well, it went on, like there were probably about 7 different time periods for the relocation programs,
Okay.
starting in the 40s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even as late as the 70s.
Uh-huh.
So, that was always, but as usual, it was like badly planned. Like here they're offering, okay, we're going to pay for you to send you to the city, you and your wife, or you and your family. But like once they got there, there were usually like no jobs, no place to live. If you take somebody who's lived on a pueblo or a reservation all of their life, or in a native type of community, and you just drop them in the middle of the city, that's really hard to survive. I mean, kids have a hard time doing that, going to college.
Right.
So, so think about, this. So my grandparents met in Haskell, because my grandmother was Blackfeet and my grandfather was Comanche, and they met in Lawrence, Kansas at Haskell University, which it wasn't a university at the time. It was just a trade school for Native people. Now it's a college, it's a university. But they took one of those programs in the 40s, and they moved to, the first time they moved, because they did this several times, was to California. So as my grandmother was going, they were driving to California, or I guess it was maybe a train they took. So, because they didn't have a car, so it was a train. And so my grandmother, from being in Northern Plains, was a great moccasin maker. So she had traded a pair of moccasins for a squash blossom that I have to this day, on her way going through the Southwest, going to California. But my grandfather ended up working in the defense, air defense. He worked he was like a riveter. You know how you see Rosie the riveter?
Yes.
So they lived in Rancho Cucamonga, and he worked in the defense industry because he was able to land a job. But, they would be a success story, because there's not always success stories.
A lot of Standing Deer's friends that went with him to the program in California never saw their families again. They were pressured when the program was over not to go back to their homes and reservations, and there was a lot of alcoholism. Diane McKenzie, who's on the call today, her father made a film called The Exiles. It's set in 1956. It's a documentary about the Navajos that were displaced to downtown LA. There's no tribal community, so they're all meeting in bars at night, and it's a real interesting cultural thing, because this was like 1956 when Elvis Presley was at his height. So all of the Navajos have cut their hair and have pompadours. So it's just a weird cultural assimilation.
Yeah.
But I didn't know anything about the relocation program until Diane sent me a copy of the Exiles film, and that was a real eye-opener.
And what a beautiful film. And it's shot in black and white, in case you haven't seen it. And, the Native people, I mean, it's just beautiful.
Wow. And that's in the 50s.
That's
right?
her dad.
Yes.
So where are you at with the film now, and with Man of Many Colors, and what is it going to take to bring it to completion?
So right now we've got about 50 or 60% of the film in the can. And right now we want to start post-production editing so we can work with an editor and go through everything that we have. And then we'll be making decisions about what's next. Jhane wants us to put together a wish list of people that we can interview. I'm very excited that Dorothea Lange was a very famous photographer, and her granddaughter is an amazing cinematographer, Diana Taylor. And she's just agreed to come on board and finish shooting the film. you know, she's done films for American Masters. She just finished shooting the Mulan live action film for Disney, and she did the photography on a film called Who Will Write Our Stories about the Warsaw Ghetto. So so what'll happen is that, you know, we want to go through and just review everything that we have and put together a rough assembly, and then we'll go back and reshoot it, fill those holes. So right now we have a total of 30,000 that we're raising. The Indiegogo campaign is for $20,000, and once we get started with that, we'll be on to the next phase of the film.
And will that be enough to finish, or will you need more?
We'll need more.
Okay.
We'll have
Piecemeal approach.
yeah. I kind of go one step at a time.
Yes.
You do a step, and then you show people what you just did and say, hey, let's go ahead and raise some more funds. So it's kind of an ongoing process. Some people, I don't know about you, but some people are lucky to have all the money when they start, and some people
Rarely.
pay as you go.
Rarely.
That's indie, yeah.
When the film is finished, do you have an idea of where would be the ideal place to distribute the film?
Well, we need to talk about this. I have a relationship with PBS because my last film is now being broadcast around the country in about 100 different markets. And Jhane has a experience with American Masters, and so you know, I guess the plan would be, if we could finish it by next September, we could enter it in the Sundance. And the distribution also is we're talking to Mutiny Pictures, and then there's just other types, you know, of broadcasting and screening. We were very successful with the last film. We went to lots of art museums and universities, and we had we got a grant within New Mexico to have community premieres, so that the local community could be engaged with this film. And you know, it's really rare to have a film that's so much about Taos history,
Right.
and the modern artists, and also, you know, introducing issues that are important to natives.
Yes. Jhane, what do you feel would be just, I mean, one or two things, ideas for community engagement with this film? Because I feel as though, on the one hand, I see it's wonderful, like everything you've talked about is about Native Americans seeing themselves on film, but I also feel as though there's a great hunger for people who are not Native to learn more. So I just wonder what community engagement might look like for this project.
I think with the way that all the, I hate to say, like racial tensions or the changes in race in this time, it kind of leaves us really open, like the door is wide open for community engagement. Not only Native community engagement, but like he said before, university. In fact, I was going to talk to him later, but I'll talk to him in front. I'll talk to him in front of all of you.
Let's have we'll take a
I'll
meeting.
talk to him in front of all of you.
Us.
But I think that we should create a separate budget for community engagement, because on my last film we did with American Masters on In Scott Mama Day, Words from a Bear. So on that film, that was like a first. There's so many glass ceilings that still need to be broken. So this was the first time American Masters had we had a 90% Native film crew, 90%, from our director to the writers to the producers. We had like one Anglo and one Asian, but everybody else was Native. And when we pitched this to them, they were kind of iffy, you know, because they'd never seen a Native film crew. Could these people actually do this, right? And our director's brilliant, you know, Jeff, he's Jeff Palmer, he's Kiowa, and In Scott Mama Day's Kiowa. So if anybody doesn't...
And Scott Mama Day is the first and only Native American poet to win the Pulitzer prize for literature.
Yes, and he's still alive, and he's here in Santa Fe.
Ah,
So I was the supervising producer, but for American Masters, it was something new for them because their model is 70-year-old Anglo man.
aha.
Who directs and who picks the subjects and everything. So like here we are, obviously not 70-year-old native Anglo men. So, unfortunately they gave us like 3/4 of the budget of what they normally give people to work on. So normally like their budgets for their films are like, I don't know, probably like $1.2 million, $1.3 million. We got 775,000 to bring this in. So it's like, so still there are those things, people do to you to handicap you, but it didn't handicap us because we all come from a independent background. So it's like, oh, $775. Oh my God, we're gonna make an incredible film, right?
Yes.
So
Fantastic.
so the funny part was the first time I got a check, because I'm so used to working on stuff and maybe you'll get a check later or what. So I got my first check from them. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to save this for Christmas. Put it back in the envelope and just stuck it on my dresser. I get a phone call from American Masters and they're like, Jhane, did you get your paycheck that we sent you? And I said, yes. And they said, okay, well, we do our books quarterly and we still show that money's out. And I said, oh, I was saving it for Christmas for my children. And they said, well, you need to like deposit it or cash it or something. So, but that film was nominated for an Emmy. Just it was under the umbrella of their showrunner is willing to take chances and he's really great. His name's Michael Cantor. And so, he's the big decision maker. And in fact, when we did our very first shoot here in Santa Fe up on Museum Hill, which is like a stone's throw from Mark's place, he actually came. The people from Vision Maker Media came, the director, but also Michael Cantor came. And he wanted to just see, because he thought, okay, I'm giving these people, almost $1 million. Are they going to do this? And when he showed up, I mean, we had all the equipment rented, everything was sent in. I mean, I have an office up on Museum Hill, so I had everything sent to my office. And so I knew it was secure. And then he was kind of like, he relaxed a little bit. But, it's like, okay, you're taking a chance on
Taking a risk, yeah.
Yes, and I guess in his mind, we're a risk. Now we're not a risk anymore.
Right. That's
and
right.
Yes, and we did at Sundance, we showed a clip of the film, and we did a lot of, because New Mexico's beautiful, everyone, New Mexico's beautiful. So we did a lot of drone work, and because we didn't have like because everything has to be approved by American Masters, so we didn't really have a trailer, so we just did some drone work and put something together to show people at a panel on independent film on documentary at Sundance. After we showed that brief little thing and talked about our experience, we didn't say, we were shortchanged. We didn't say all the real stuff. But a lady walks up and she's like, so what are your plans? Who are you showing this to? And what are your plans for community engagement? And I was like, that's my, okay. So what we would like to do, I gave her this whole spiel. She was from Kellogg and she gave us an extra $225,000. She said, so first she said, I want to help you with your film. And I said, well, for once, we did it kind of backwards and independent because we have our budget and we have what we need. So, we didn't need film funding. Yes. And she said, well, what is it you don't have funding for? And I was like, Native community engagement and, Native engagement. And she said, well, would $225,000 help you? Yeah. And we're like, yes. So like, it was great because we were able to be fast tracked. So when we filled out that application, we didn't have to go into the big pool of everyone because we were already kind of had made our little mark. Our film wasn't finished, but yet we got fast tracked. And look, it brought us up to the amount of what we were shortchanged by saying, by not being, 70-year-old Anglo men with one vision. So, so sometimes if you do get shortchanged, just take it in stride, keep pushing forward because, something like that, believed in us and saw our drone footage because that's all we could kind of put together really quick. And look what happened. And
I really want to open it up to questions, but I really could listen to you all day. So I've left it kind of late, but and we can still finish on time. I just want to, because I know you've got work to do, because apparently you've got to figure out your distribution and community engagement plan. But does anybody have a question that they would like to ask? Oh, Mark.
I just want to say one thing. So from this conversation, I'm the token 68-year-old
Right.
Anglo male.
Yes.
And I'm just window dressing.
He's got a future at American Masters.
There we go. So let's make 5 more films.
Does anybody have a question they would like to ask? Diane.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Plant. Diane is like my plant.
I'm fine. So I'll ask a question if no one else will.
Question. But thank you for that, Diane.
No problem. I'm happy to serve that function. It's so great, Mark, to hear that you're launching your crowdfunder. It's so wonderful to meet you, Jane. I just, Mark's been talking about you for a while, and that's really exciting. Thank you for the compliments on the Exiles. I believe that the reason that it's still around is, in fact, because it is so beautiful to look at and was done in that fashion. And so for me, I mean, as Joanne and Mark and some others know, I'm working on a film right now telling a story about female artists who have survived or experienced sexual and physical trauma, and then how we incorporate it into our work. And my premise being is truly looking at it, how we empower ourselves and our communities via that. And needless to say, when I'm talking to people, one of the things that is challenging is to truly keep it totally, I want women. This has got to be a project that's women-led, and we're also wanting to bring in other stories. I mean, I definitely, obviously, I'm white, and those are my cultural experiences, and that's the cultural experience of some of the other subjects. And so, I guess, I mean, thinking about the Exiles, because actually, it's being a class that's being taught at NYU right now is using it as one of the films. I think that one of the things that was successful about that is, even though, yes, obviously my father was a white male, there was only one woman on the crew. He did give final cut, though, basically, to his subjects. They truly got to, which to me was the one I thought it was brilliant, for one thing, in terms of a call as a filmmaker, but it also really gave, I don't know, there was a authenticity that perhaps there wouldn't have been. And in terms of women, one of the things that I would love to talk to you, Jane, about is just like the depiction of women in it is horrifying. I mean, the way women are treated in the 50s is pretty horrifying, whether you're Native American or otherwise. And I don't know, so I guess, but what did work about that story was my father wasn't he was literally looking at it as an existential crisis. He was looking at it, he wasn't identifying them simply as Native Americans or Indians, as they would have been called at that point, being cast into the city. I mean, as you said, I mean, they were dropped down in downtown Los Angeles with no ways to make a living, with no nothing was done to support them culturally. It was a program that was designed by the same person that came up with the Japanese internment camps. So there just was literally no sensitivity whatsoever. And so I guess for me, it's like, so how do we all come together? I thought it was the Exiles, again, was an example of a collective story. It told a story of a group of people. And to me, so I don't know, do you have any recommendations, I guess, or just because that to me is what's interesting about all of this, is telling community and collective stories, because obviously now as a woman, what's really foregrounded is how do I bring other women whose stories are different than mine? But, I think, does that make sense?
Yes. And I think that what in the Exiles, what appealed to me, because I was like, okay, I'm pretending that I'm white and I'm watching this, and what would I get from it? Because, for Native culture, I mean, this is how I grew up, so it's not anything new to me. But what I liked is that they had the scene that they showed when the letter, because remember the woman would write a letter home, and then her family, because most people watching that, especially in the 50s and mainly even today, had no idea what reservation life was like, and then they had that flashback to where they were on the reservation. I thought that really lent a lot to the story, and I think that when you talk with your subjects, because like for when we did Words from a Bear, we tried to use some of the Kiowa language that was really important to illustrate it to people, but also to kind of give people like a little teaching tool, but to put a comfort in between us making a film, because when you make documentaries, these are not actresses, these are real people.
Right.
So what you have to do, and I'm sure you're very intuitive being a filmmaker, is, you know, okay, so how do you appeal to that person where they're comfortable opening up and telling you that story? Because when you're making those documentaries, if a person is comfortable with you, they forget that a camera's there, and they end up telling you something that, you know, is like such a caveat that you didn't really, you know. Like, let me see. So Ladonna Harris, it's not an actress, but, you know, she's been a public figure.
Right.
So we just booked her to do it because she's my relative. And I told Jeff, I said, we should get Ladonna, because Ladonna was in Washington, D.C. at that time when Scott lived in Washington, D.C. So that's kind of like putting your timeline where people are and putting your wish list together. So here we are interviewing her, just the three crew, right? Three of us, cameras rolling, and I'm talking to her, and I said, so tell me, you know, what was it like at that time when Scott, you know, won his Pulitzer? And she said, well, he finally brought Native people into, you know, modern day. And then she sits back and she goes, you know, he was in between women at the time. and she said, and so, because her husband was a senator, U.S. senator, and she said, and when he won, he called me because he was so excited, and he was like, will you go with me to this? Like, we had no idea she was his date. Like, she was with him when he received this in New York. So meanwhile, like, so I'm just sitting there, and I have chill bumps telling this now. So I just keep going with her. So what was it like? So I told Fred, I'm going to go with him when he receives this because he's really nervous. She said, so Fred rented us a limo from Washington to New York. We went to this event, and I was there with him. He was so nervous, but we talked the whole way about what he wanted to say, et cetera, with his speech, which we got the footage for that. And then she said, then we drove back, you know, we got back into the limo and went back to Washington. So then my director, Jeff, was like, oh my God, you know, that's amazing. So that's like some of those little golden, you know, moments when people are comfortable with you and they trust you because they know, and yes, the part where Scott was in between women didn't make the film, but you know,
a lot of that doesn't.
Yeah, but the part, you know, so like, you know, those are just those beautiful little moments. And I had no idea that she was, because we had, you know, you forget like those little things. So when you got your award, who was there with you? We never even asked him that. And then here we had that. And then when I brought it up to him later, he's laughing and giggling. And yes, that car ride, you know, we had a limo and we just talked the whole way and talked about, I mean, you know, it was just like, oh. So, you know, it's that kind of thing. So whether it's a person of whatever color you are, we're all people. So what's important is that, you know, you as a filmmaker, you're genuine. And you're, you know, and you're honest, and you're going to tell the truth of this story, you know.
You know, there's an interview that I want to use with Standing Deer in this new film that we did during the first video, and it didn't make it to Awakening in Taos, but he was talking about his grandfather and his father and the impact that they had on him, and how his grandfather's songs, he's made them into paintings. And all of a sudden he stops. And I said, what's going on? He said, my grandfather's spirit just came in.
Oh, wow.
And then he went into this beautiful monologue about what being that the most fragile thing he'll ever be is Tiwa, and what it meant to him and how he felt about his people, and he was crying. So, you know, I had to make a film about that. And it was totally unscripted, totally unplanned.
Wow, beautiful. Before we've already 5 minutes over, before we let our fabulous guests go, does anybody have one last question?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question if possible.
I actually, go ahead. quick one.
YouTube.
Yeah, quick one.
You-
Basically, what kind of connection, interaction is there between Native American writers and filmmakers? I know that Sherman Alexie's was, he's been somewhat involved in. I don't know if there's a network in that area.
There's a huge network, and not necessarily going through the WGA, but maybe like just looking independently, because there are so many Native poets. Like a new book just came out this week by Hyde Eldrick, and Louise Eldrick is that's her aunt, and there's like a ton of Native writers now. Stephen Paul Judd, just a lot to mention. That are a whole different generation away from Sherman Alexie.
Right. Maggie, I'm going to ask you quick too. You're muted still, Maggie.
Just click on the little red thing.
There.
Oh, I
There
think
you
I
go.
got you unmuted. Yes, go
Okay.
ahead.
Hi, I'm at the beginning stages of writing an episodic feature, episodic, and my main character is half Yavapai Apache. His father, who is Native, is still alive. So my question is basically, how soon do I bring in somebody who has a little more authority on Native culture?
I think you should bring that person in as soon as possible, because that way that cuts down on your rewrites. If you get it right the first time or close to how you want it, then and I think that says a lot for you too as a writer, because you want to not just maybe take a culture from that you've seen in a book or in a film or whatever.
I lived in Arizona for 20 years, and
Okay, great.
so I have a little bit of, but not enough, So
Right.
how would I go about finding someone that could look at my script?
I
Or
think you may want to like go through the Yavapai, nation. Are you trying to put like historically things in there, or just like modern day kind of?
well, it's modern day and it's narrative, and I have
Okay.
it set in Tucson, Arizona, where I have lived. So go
Yeah,
through one of the specific tribes, perhaps.
Yes, whatever tribe that you're going to, but maybe just
Okay.
do a Google search too and see who's like a Yavapai writer or native writers from that area.
Okay.
I think that would be important.
Okay. Thank you so much, and good
Sure.
luck to you.
Thank
Go
you.
local. Go local. And
Yes,
and
definitely go local.
totally now, because the cheapest part of filmmaking is script writing.
I've learned that.
So thank you so much, Mark and Jane. I
Thank
just so appreciate this. Really felt like a really deep conversation. I really, really loved it. So
I learned a lot.
yes, I learned a lot too. So Mark posted the crowdfunding campaign. No, that's what I was going to just get it again. Can you post it again, Mark?
Yeah.
I'm not getting it quite. Just post it again.
There's a short one here.
Oh, there it is.
igg.me
Fancy.
/@/standing deer.
Standing Deer.
Hey,
Okay.
Mark, I was having difficulty accessing it with using that link. I just wanted to let you know, because I know I would love to see your campaign like
Oh,
ASAP.
that one
Yeah.
worked for me. Oh,
That
may
one
be
worked?
because-
Oh, so
it may
the
be
sec-
because I'm in it, though.
Well, try this one here.
Natasha says it worked.
Hers
it
worked?
for
Okay.
me. It worked
Oh,
for me.
good. Okay, good.
So
Oh,
I
that
just-
one looks good. Okay.
Thanks, Natasha.
Okay.
And Diane, thanks so much for turning me on to the Exiles, because I didn't know about the relocation program. And
Right.
Standing Deer said it took him years to realize that he'd been played by it.
Wow.
And it took us to a whole other level of what the story is about. So thanks for that contribution. It was in a setting just like this. Thank you.
And I also just wanted to say, Mark, I'll reach out to you afterwards. I'd be happy to connect you with not only Eric Darstad, who's still alive, he was a cinematographer, who's really still in that community, as well as obviously when we re-released The Exiles, Sherman Alexie was involved, Charles Burnett. And so there's a whole network of people that would love to know what you guys are doing, and potentially you would get some funding out of that. I
I'm,
mean,
I'm open.
yeah, I figured you would be, but I'm happy to do that.
We're dialing for dollars.
Yeah, best of luck with the campaign. I know you're going to do really well. So thank you everybody for coming. It's 11:11.
Make a wish.
11:11.
So goodbye and
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Best of luck.
see you
Nice
next
to
week.
meet you both.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joanne.
Bye.